Well, welcome back everybody. This is our continuing segment on forming technology-based collaboration. The collaborations can be with federal laboratories, the collaborations can be with large firms, medium firms, small high technology firms. It really doesn't matter, the principles are the same. These are complex deals, but there are tools, metrics, and management techniques that we've developed over the years that allow people to form these relationships and commercialize technology in very powerful ways. What I'd like to do today is to introduce you to the Alliance Framework. It is a rigorous, structured approach for planning, structuring, and negotiating a strategic alliance or a technology collaboration. I've been doing this for 25 years. I haven't found anything better than the Alliance Framework, and I want to introduce it to you. So here's an overview of the presentation. We're going to start with some definitions. I'll then introduce you to the framework. There's application. How do you apply this framework to what you're trying to do? Reflections means I'll talk a little bit about how this is used by other companies and used quite well, and then we're going to have some time for questions and answers. Before I get too deep into the Alliance Framework, we have to talk about what is a strategic alliance. The easiest way for me to tell you what it is to tell you what it's not. So this is not your traditional procurement relationship as ordered, as accepted. That's not an alliance. If you can just buy it, buy it. Let's go to the other extreme. The other extreme is a merger and acquisition. We're not talking about mergers, we're not talking about acquisitions today. We're talking about something in between. And this slide really describes exactly what we're talking about. So the key aspects of the definition of Alliance Framework are: one, agreed upon objectives. Do you and I agree upon what the technology commercialization objectives are? It's a resource combination. I'm going to bring something to this relationship, you're going to bring something to this relationship, and we're going to coordinate and integrate those resources into a functioning, commercializable whole. There's interdependence, because you and I can't do this individually. If we could, we'd do it individually. It's a limited relationship within specific boundaries. Inside these boundaries, we're allied. Outside the boundaries, we're not allied. We play by different rules. And I'll talk fairly deeply about how do you set those boundaries, because it's such a crucial component of forming an alliance. And then finally, it's long-term. Long-term is kind of a fuzzy statement. The real issue here is not that it's long-term, it's the term required for us to be commercially successful. At some point, most alliances terminate, and they terminate for good reasons. What's the Alliance Framework? It is a rigorous tool. The best way to describe a tool itself is if you could describe the person who created it. And his name is Dr. Matthew Sagal. He retired as the business development vice president for AT&T Microelectronics, which became a gear. But understand that some of the most complex technology commercialization deals on the planet occur in that microelectronics area. And he did it for 15 years. He also has a PhD in physical chemistry from MIT. And so you know that someone with an extraordinarily disciplined mind put this process together. When he retired, we asked him two simple questions. When it worked, what did you do? And when it didn't work, what did you do? And that resulted in the Alliance Framework. So the rest of this slide says something important. There are two definitions of success. One is we successfully negotiated an alliance, we did the deal, we implemented the deal, we got to the marketplace, it was wonderful. That's a definition of success. But there's a second definition, which is we realized very quickly that the goals and objectives of the alliance were not mutually agreed upon. You and I had disagreements on fundamental aspects of this relationship, and therefore we part friends. We part soon, we part friends. Velocity is key. In high technology areas, the marketplace window is closing at a rapid rate. In fact, in the world of microelectronics, where Matt came from, many products have an 18-month product life cycle, so we don't have a year to do a deal. The question is, how do you very rapidly come to a high-quality decision that a deal is possible and we should move forward, or a deal is not possible, let's part friends today because you never know when we need each other next week. Now that we've gone through some quick definitions, I'd like to introduce you to the framework itself. The Alliance Framework is not the checklist of all knowledge. It's not something that you just go down and check all the little boxes and you're fine. Deals are far too complicated for that. It's also not a PowerPoint presentation, because PowerPoint presentations tend to be made of bullet points, and those bullet points hide nuances that the reader doesn't understand. The Alliance Framework is a document, and it's a document that explains in New Jersey English exactly what it is you're trying to do at a technical level and a business level. It captures the intents of both parties through a series of what Matt calls elements. The way to think about an element is to think about it as a chapter heading. Also, I'd like you to know that the Alliance Framework is a registered trademark of Matt Sagal, but you're free to use it. It's a registered trademark protecting it in the area of management consulting. But as a high technology entrepreneur, you're free to use the Alliance Framework, and I hope you use it well. The fundamental insight of the Alliance Framework is that every relationship is really three alliances in one. That's the fundamental insight. Let's take a look at Company A here, sort of the grayish box, R&D, marketing operations. Do these internal groups agree on goals, objectives, milestones, timelines, budgets? Inside our own organization, do we agree? Do we have an internal alliance? If the answer is no, we're already in big trouble. Let's go over to the other side now. Let's take a look at a federal laboratory. So it has Research Group 1, it has a Tech Transfer Organization, it has an R&D Group 2. Do they agree on things like goals and objectives and timelines and milestones and budgets? If we don't agree and they don't agree, we're never going to come together into an alliance that's going to make some sense. The purpose of the Alliance Framework is to methodically, and I use that word carefully, methodically create the internal alliance inside Company A, our company. Then methodically help the other side, be it a federal laboratory or another company, methodically create their internal alliance. And then we bring the two alliances, the two agreements together into alliance number 3, the red circle in the middle, and ask the question, are the alliance agreements between Company A and Organization B able to be brought together in such a way that makes commercial sense, that in the marketplace we're going to be successful? So that's the purpose of the Alliance Framework. And it has 3 stop points. Stop point number 1 is our internal agreement. If we don't come to internal agreement inside our own company, then just stop. We're never going to go visit Company B or Organization B. That's stop point number 1. Stop point number 2 is when we go to visit our potential partner, we're going to present them with a document, and they're going to review that document. And if they look at that document and say, you know, that document works for us, we'd like to follow up with that in further negotiations, then we've gotten through stop point number 2. If the other side says, I saw your document, looks lovely, it's not us, then just stop. Kill the deal right there. The third option is that Organization B, the other side, looks at the document and says, I like some parts of it not so much. Let's talk about these things. Well, then you've gotten through stop point number 2. We'll go to stop point number 3, but you've done so in a very thoughtful, methodical, disciplined way. And then stop point number 3 is when you come together and negotiate some very detailed elements like the financial model, like allocating intellectual property rights, termination provisions, but we'll get to that in just a moment. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to walk you through stop point number 1, building the internal alliance. As you can see on this slide, there's a series of elements or chapter headings. For the internal alliance, we're going to write some paragraphs on every one of those chapter headings. Objectives, why am I in this deal? Why are you in this deal? Roles, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? What do we do together? What can either one of us do? Resources, what do you bring? What do I bring? Do we have enough? Do we need something else? Boundaries, inside a set of boundaries, we're allied. We play by rules. Outside those boundaries, different rules. Strategic exclusivity. Am I your only partner? Can you do this deal with others? Maybe there's allocations like field of use exclusivity, time exclusivity, geographic exclusivity. We're going to talk all about that in another segment on allocating intellectual property rights. So don't miss that segment. That's an important one. Market model. Whose brand? Your brand, my brand, customer communications and support, intersections with the potential alliance. Have I done something in my business that interferes with your financial model? What does that mean? Well, maybe I already exclusively licensed my technology to another company in Japan. So your financial model is a global use of my technology. The new financial model says you can use my technology every place in the world except Japan. That just changed your financial model. So I'm going to go through each one of these chapter headings in greater detail in a few moments. But I want you to see how we are going to use these chapter headings to really force our own organization to answer the tough questions. We are not going to allow our organization to give fuzzy answers to important issues, because that's how you drag on negotiations forever. Every one of these chapter headings for the internal first stop point will be written down in paragraph form. What we do is we take those chapter headings to the key people inside our organization. Anybody that has a budgetable resource. They review it and they make their comments. And some of the comments will be positive and some of the comments will be negative. And if we cannot resolve the comments of the key people inside our organization, stop. We're never going to go visit the partner. We do not have internal alignment. So what I want to do now is I want to introduce you to the application of that technique. It's a 6-step process, and the first 2 steps are designed to hit the internal stop point, the first stop point. So step 1 is appointing the planning and negotiating team. Who's on our team? Depends a lot on your company. If you have a 4-person company, all 4 people are on your team. If you have a bigger company, anybody that will provide a critical resource to this alliance, if it goes forward, is now part of your team. So if it's an R&D alliance, it's very likely, it's important that you're going to have an alliance, you're going to have an R&D person on your team. You're likely to have a business development person. If you do, he or she will be on your team. If you have a lawyer, I want your lawyer on the team, even if it's external counsel. It's critical to have a lawyer on the team, because when the team comes to agreement on the alliance framework, I want to ensure that the translation of the alliance framework is accurately translated into the contract terms and conditions. We don't want the situation in which the team comes to agreement on one thing, but the lawyer wasn't involved, and when he or she drafts the contract, he or she did not understand something very important in the deal and misses that nuance in the contract language. We don't want that to happen. So anybody with a budgetable resource has a representative on our team. Who else? Who leads the team? The person who has operational responsibility for the relationship, it's usually an R&D person, will lead the team. But there is a senior executive who is the champion of the team. And that senior executive's role is to ensure that the team is supported from the top of the organization and that the team has the resources needed to go through the planning, structuring, and negotiating process. So that's step 1. Now we come to step 2. Well, we've already talked about step 2. This is where we write down the alliance framework, our paragraphs on every single chapter heading, and we distribute it to the key people in the organization who will have a budgetable resource, or somebody who doesn't have a budgetable resource but has a yes or no decision-making ability. For example, lawyers, international tax people, depends on what your company looks like. So what I want to do now is I want to walk you through the definitions of each one of the chapter headings so that you have the opportunity to understand at a deeper level exactly what people expect to see and want to see in the document that you'll be writing. So the first one is objectives. Sounds easy? Well, it's not. Ready for a not an objective? Double-digit growth. We want double-digit growth. It's not an objective. We want to be number one in customer satisfaction. Not an objective. Why not? If your objectives are equally valid for the local gas station as they are for your firm, you don't have an objective. Here's an objective. I want exclusive rights to Federal Laboratory A's technology for a specific field of use, North America only. I want sub-licensing rights necessary to engage a second source for manufacturing. Do you see how that is an objective statement that guides the rest of your thinking? I want exclusive rights. I just said something important. I want exclusive rights to Federal Laboratory technology in a specific field of use. I just said something important. In a specific geography, that's important. Sub-licensing rights necessary to develop a second source, that's important because it guides the rest of your thinking. So that's a well-crafted objective statement, and to the extent that you're clear on your objectives, the rest of the alliance framework sort of guides you through that process. Roles. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What do we do together? What can neither one of us do? We need a third party. Boy, does this become important. But there's a detonator here. There's a hidden detonator. Who has the final vote? Yeah, who has the final vote? In a biotech deal, I can introduce you to the biotech deal where the little biotech company said, I'm going to design the study for the FDA. And the big, gigantic pharmaceutical company who's been working with the FDA forever said, no, we're going to design the study. These two companies came to loggerheads and it took way too long to get over that particular issue. In the area where you are the expert, you should have the final vote. Boundaries. Oh, this is important. Remember I said inside the boundaries we're allied, we play by rules. Outside the boundary, we're not allied, we play by different rules. Crafting the boundary is an art form. I will never forget my first alliance where I'm a smart guy. His name was Dave. Dave was a smart guy. We were going to do a one-page deal. I knew what the boundaries were. He knew what the boundaries were. We didn't have to talk about that. Well, we did have to talk about it because when I used his background intellectual property in what I thought were the boundaries, but he didn't think were the boundaries, I stopped them cold from a strategic move they wanted to make because I had already made the move. It's a longer story and one that brings tears to my eyes, so we won't go there. But if I had it to do all over again, I would describe to Dave in very clear language what the boundaries were from a technology platform perspective, and products and process, and markets or customer segments, and field of use, applications, geography, time. You see, if I describe to you in very clear language along those dimensions what I believe the boundaries are, and if you describe to me in very clear language what your view of the boundaries are along those dimensions, there cannot be a miscommunication between us. And that's the right way to do boundaries. So please use these dimensions as the baseline, as the foundation for your description of the boundaries of the deal to the other side. Exclusivity. Is this an exclusive deal? Non-exclusive deal? Exclusive in a particular boundary, field of use, geography, time? Exclusivity is a powerful tool, but it is also a flexible tool. When you look at the boundaries that we just created, ask yourself the question, how valuable is it for me to be the only one using this technology in that boundary? You're going to pay for exclusivity. Exclusive deals require higher payments than non-exclusive deals. You also want to worry about performance metrics whenever you sign an exclusive deal. The issue is, I have formed an exclusive deal with the other will be using my technology, the other will be paying for the use of my technology. But unless they hit a specific set of metrics, I may not be rewarded to the extent necessary to provide them with an exclusive right. It also protects me from somebody parking my technology. There are examples of companies who took an exclusive deal simply to protect their own marketplace position. So they formed an exclusive deal on the technology, they were the only ones that were allowed to use it, and then they parked it on the shelf. So performance metrics protect you from those situations. And the moment you see an exclusive deal, the knee-jerk reaction should be performance metrics. Market model. From the marketplace looking in, what does this deal look like? Whose brand? Your brand? My brand? Maybe we co-brand it. Customer communications and support. Who writes the brochures? Who does the TV commercials? How do we deal with the internet on this? What does our online presence look like? And for small companies who are thinking about doing an IPO, who books sales? If you hadn't thought about that, this segment just paid for itself. Who books sales? Because when the time comes to do your IPO, you want to be the company that's booking sales. Intersections with the potential alliance. It gets back to that discussion we had about a company who signed an exclusive license for their biotechnology product in Japan. If I have done something that's going to interfere with your financial model, I must tell you right away. I signed an exclusive license in Japan. I have a deal with the university, and this is what the payment stream to the university through royalties looks like. Early on, I want to tell you anything that will interfere with this deal from your perspective. It allows you to make a quick, reasonable, smart decision about whether or not you want to move on. I stopped there with the definitions because those are what's called the above-the-line chapter headings. You saw the little blue line there? When we go to step 3 and approach the potential partner, I'm only going to bring the little chapter headings that were above the line. I may redact those chapter headings. There may be some confidential information in there. Don't over-redact. We need to tell the other side what our strategic intent is so they can make a decision as to whether or not they want to move forward. The above-the-line chapter headings are called the strategic assessment elements because they allow the other side to determine whether or not they are strategically aligned with our vision. When we go to the other side, you're very likely going to want to execute the appropriate NDA. Talk to your lawyer about that. Prior to visiting the other side, you want to send them the document with the above-the-line chapter headings so that they have an opportunity to review it and develop their questions. When you go visit the other side, we're not starting negotiations. We're there to answer clarifying questions about our own strategic intent. We want to give the other side the opportunity to understand as clearly as possible what our view of this marketplace opportunity looks like. You're going to bring a senior executive with you when you go visit the other side. Why? Is the senior executive going to negotiate the deal? Usually not. It's probably not a good idea. The senior executive is there to show the organization's support of the deal, to remove any barriers inside his or her organization to move forward with planning and structuring the deal, and finally to be able to say to the other side, this deal is so important to me that I, the senior executive, will allocate the resources necessary to the planning and the structuring and the negotiation components of the alliance framework. What we've just talked about is stop point number 2. If the other side looks at your alliance framework above the line chapter headings and says, I think we want to move forward, then you got past stop point number 2. If they look at your strategic intent, your above the line chapter headings, and say, not interested, that's a good thing because you stopped wasting time. You limited your resource risk to what has already been described. But if they say we'd like to move forward, or we have some concerns, but we'd still like to move forward, you're now at step 4, which is resource fit assessment. Here's the question. Does my firm have the quantity, quality, and timeliness of the resources you need? I've just told you what I have. But how accurate is that from your perspective? So you're going to come to my shop and you're going to interview my people, you're going to look at my laboratory, you're going to understand what my patent situation looks like, and you're going to ask the question, do I really have what I say I have? Timeliness, quality, quantity of resources. That's the resource fit assessment. Matt calls them tire kicks. I'm going to come to your shop and I'm going to do the exact same thing because both firms have to make sure that if we bring our resources together, we have 100% of what we need to be successful, or if we don't have 100% of what we need, we know what the missing percentage is so that we can get it from the outside world. So that's resource fit assessment. That should be done under the appropriate NDA, and it should be done under the appropriate agenda. I should come to you with exactly what I expect to see when I come visit your shop so that you're prepared to present me with the information in an efficient way. So that's resource fit assessment. If both sides are comfortable that the other side has the resources that are required to move forward, we move to step 5. Step 5 is selecting the partner. Oftentimes you're only going to be negotiating with one partner, therefore selecting the partner becomes easy or trivial. Unfortunately, there's rarely the perfect partner, and so sometimes you will be negotiating with more than one company to ensure that you're finding the best possible partner. Step 5 is where you make that final selection down. If you have been negotiating with more than one, step 5 is the place where you say, I'm picking partner A and I'm not picking partner B. If you are negotiating with more than one, I strongly suggest to you that you let the other sides know that you are negotiating with more than one company. You don't have to provide the names or any confidential information, but it is polite, if you will, to let other partners know that you are negotiating with more than one. When you make your final decision, as politely as you possibly can, tell the non-selected partner that they were non-selected because you may need them tomorrow. So that's selecting the partner. And finally, one of the things that we'd like to do in step 6 is talk about negotiating the definitive agreement. As you know, one of the focuses of this series of lectures is on working with federal laboratories. They work under a series of legal constraints that if you understand the constraints, it's much easier for you to work with a federal laboratory, and it's much easier for them to work with you. In order to help you understand what those legal constraints are and those contractual constraints, we've written 2 articles, Intellectual Property and Other Contractual Issues in Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. Those 2 articles can be downloaded for free from the website, and I strongly encourage you to read those articles and frankly understand every single word if you're thinking about doing a deal with a federal laboratory. Federal laboratory or not federal laboratory, if you're going to be negotiating with another organization, try to address each alliance framework element in parallel. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to go through the alliance framework in a structured way so that both sides can get a very clear idea of what your intent is. Use the alliance framework elements as a starting point, the chapter headings that we've given you, but add your own if you need to. For example, privacy element. If you're doing an internet deal, you're very likely going to need a privacy element. Add that in. Feel good. Add elements if you'd like. Subtract them at your own risk. If you decide that an element is not important, don't subtract it. Just tell the other side, I don't think this is important, this is why, and see what the other side has to say. As you're going through this negotiation, there's going to come a point where both sides say, why are we doing this separately? Why don't we just work on one document? Combine the documents, that's the right thing to do, and then this is another very important time to make sure that your lawyers are engaged, because many of the largest changes or the nuanced changes in an agreement come during the last week or 2 of negotiation. You want your lawyer involved so that he or she is able to accurately translate the alliance framework document into contractual provisions. Here's the titles, the citations of the 2 articles that I just described, and you can download them from strategicalliance.com. What I'd like to do now is sort of reflect a little bit on the alliances in my 25 years of experience. So post-negotiation, one of the reasons you want the implementer as part of the alliance planning and negotiating team is you're looking for a seamless transition. You also want to be able to communicate the detailed objectives and the detailed resources elements to the implementation team of both partners. These are the people who are going to be carrying out the work. They need to know at a deep level what it is you agreed to, because they're the ones that have got to convert that agreement into actual products, actual opportunities that move into the marketplace. You want people to understand what the governance structure looks like. They're going to be working under that governance structure. How you're going to deal with mid-course corrections, how you're going to deal with conflicts as they arrive, the invariable conflicts that arrive. So post-negotiation, you're going to sit down with the members of both implementation teams and have a discussion. I've given you sort of a thumbnail sketch of that discussion. There is another segment of this series called Managing the Relationship, where I'm going to walk you through a wonderful set of tools and metrics and management techniques that are designed to convert the contract into a series of activities that the implementation teams in both firms will be carrying out, right? So that's Managing the Relationship. That's another segment in this series. So questions and answers. The way I want to deal with questions and answers, since this is quite a one-way conversation, is I'd like to share with you the details of the Alliance Framework chapters that you haven't seen yet. So let me start with summary of the business plan. The business plan summary is important for your first stop point because you want to ensure that your management team understands the relationship that you're talking about fits elegantly into the business plan. I'm not here to lecture on business plans. There's a zillion books on it, but I want to make sure that one of your chapter headings talks about that business plan summary. And if it's a very early stage technology, it may be a bit fuzzy. That's okay. What we're trying to do is we're trying to start with the business plan. It may be a loose leaf case business plan, but as we move forward, that business plan will get sharper and sharper and sharper. So the next chapter I'd like to talk about is detailed objectives and detailed resources. This is when you get down to the nitty-gritty. This is when you're really almost designing the product itself. And there's a problem here. We may be too early stage to know exactly what the product looks like. That's the art of the Alliance Framework. Do you undercook or overcook this particular chapter heading? My bias is to overcook it to the extent you can, because it forces both sides to ask the question, do I really have the resources necessary to accomplish that? If we let this go, if it gets too fuzzy, during implementation, we may have some unpleasant surprises. You know, now that I'm talking about detailed resources, while I'm executing this relationship, neither firm really has what we need to be successful. And that's not a good time to find out. You want to find out as early as possible. Working process and governance. What are the day-to-day staff interactions going to look like? How are we going to do executive oversight, project management, inter-alliance dispute resolution? This is the time to talk about those very nitty-gritty issues in any kind of organizational governance structure, but particularly in a governance structure of an inter-firm alliance where you are coordinating and integrating resources across the boundaries of two firms. Once again, the managed tools that we will be describing in another segment do a very nice job of helping you navigate those waters. The financial pie split. Oh yeah, how do we get rewarded for this? We have a module on financial pie split. You're going to enjoy that module. By Dave Weiler. He's someone that spent 25 years sort of answering the question, how do you determine what royalty rates should look like? There's another article that I'd like you to be able to download from the website on sharing risks and rewards in collaborative research agreements through the financial model. So once again, you can download that for free on the Strategic Alliance website. This is the citation, and you can download that article from strategicalliance.com. Allocating intellectual property rights. This is a big one. This is a big one. We're going to have a whole segment on allocating intellectual property rights. But I'd like you to know that there are also documents you can download for free from strategicalliance.com. The next slide gives you the citation for that document. So feel free to download that document, and I would encourage you, if possible, to read that document before you listen to the Allocating Intellectual Properties segment of this series. Term and termination. How do you get out of this deal without the help of 500 lawyers? This is the opportunity for you and your partner to describe, is there a specific term of the relationship when it will end? If not, what do the termination provisions look like? And what are the residuals? Residuals. When both firms terminate, Who takes away what? So those are the key issues in the term and termination chapter heading. And then finally, alliance structure. If you're dealing with a federal laboratory, there are a number of structures that you can use to work on a federal laboratory relationship. We have an entire segment on that where the folks from Brookhaven National Laboratory will walk you through these are the different ways that you can work with the federal laboratories. If you're not working with a federal laboratory but working with another for-profit firm, the alliance structure is going to sort of flow out the bottom of the alliance framework. It'll be a joint development agreement. It'll be some form of an alliance. But we don't start by saying, what's the alliance structure? We start by saying, tell me the answers to the questions on all the 12 chapter headings above this, and what's going to sort of pop out the bottom is the most efficient structure to achieve the objectives that you've just described in each one of those 12 chapters. Ladies and gentlemen, you survived the Alliance Framework. If you're interested, there's a book on the topic called The Strongest Link. I co-authored it with Matt Sagal. I'm not here to sell books. In fact, I think you can buy it on the dollar rack, but don't tell my mother. She was so proud when I published that book. Right? But it takes you through every single chapter in even more detail than we just did, and it describes the process of the Alliance Framework in about 150 pages. Thank you very much.